things like that, which is all standard. Hazard insurance, which is also known as fire insurance. Every lender, when you're getting a loan, will require your buyer to get hazard insurance or fire insurance. If you're in a flood zone, you'd be required, the lender also requires you to get flood insurance. Flood insurance does get pricey, and just to keep in mind, if you are showing property in a flood zone, maybe you should let your clients know flood insurance does need to be paid up front. It can't be paid through escrow. Usually runs in a couple thousand range. It's expensive. But fire insurance is always required by every lender on every close of escrow. And we are required to pay the first year through the transaction. Clients can pay it before we close escrow, and the lender will just require proof of payment. But the first year must be paid if there's a loan on the property for homeowners insurance needs to be paid at closing. Impounds. So hazard insurance impounds kind of go hand in hand. Some buyers like to have their impounds accounts set up or an escrow account. When I say escrow account, a lot of people get confused. They think that escrow is holding the impound account for the client, but we're not. It's an escrowed account that the lender is holding for the client, for the borrower. So some lenders require it, depends on the type of loan the borrower is getting. It may be required by the lender. Some it's option. They can choose to have their taxes and insurance impounded if they'd like. So when the borrower is making their mortgage payment, principal and interest every month, the impound account, they'll be paying extra into for taxes and insurance. The lender determines the impound account. The lender determines how much we need to collect at close of escrow as an initial deposit into the account. They calculate it so that the next bill, there's enough funds in the account versus every month they make a payment that they can pay that bill when it becomes due. And it just depends on the time of year you close. If the taxes are just paid, they may collect 1 or 2 months. If the taxes are going to be due in a few months, they may collect 6 or 7. Just depends on the time you're closing and when the taxes have been paid. Legal description. So every property has a legal description. Another thing to be on the lookout for when you're reviewing your prelim reports, it's good to see what's in there, because sometimes on HOAs, condos, they may describe the parking place that is attached to the unit. Or I've had properties that have boat slips in the legal description. It'll tell you which boat slip is attached to the lot, 50 feet from, the home or whatever it may be. So legal description is always good to review because there's a lot of information in there you may need. Liens, also some kind of form of encumbrance, anything attached to the property that needs to be paid, any kind of debt, mortgage, deed of trust, lien, judgment, those are all considered a lien on the property. Same as a mortgage, it's a security instrument, again, attached to the property, gets recorded to the property. PITI, so sometimes when people are doing rent backs, we see a lot of PITI rates. So if your buyer or the seller is going to rent back from the buyer, people typically include that the seller shall pay the buyer a rate of the buyer's PITI, which is principal, interest, taxes, insurance. And if the property does have a homeowners association, I recommend adding that in there as well, so that the HOA dues are also paid by the seller if they're going to rent back or anytime after the close of escrow. Power of attorneys are very specific. If you're going to have a client that's going to use a power of attorney, you need to make sure that you get title to review it to make sure that the power of attorney is acceptable for closing. If you're using a power of attorney on a real estate transaction, that power of attorney must be recorded. It can be recorded in advance, or it can be recorded with all of our documents at close of escrow, but you do need the original. It does need to be recorded on a real estate transaction. When you're using a power of attorney as well, it's a very specific signing, the way that they sign. So if you ever have questions on how a power of attorney should sign, you can call, email me, but it's basically going to be the name they're signing for by their name as attorney in fact, or initials. It will be the person they're signing on behalf of by their initials, and AIF, attorney in fact. So something to keep in mind if you do have clients that are going to use a power of attorney or need a power of attorney, that it does need to be original. We do need to have it recorded, and it does need to specify that they have the power and authority to handle real estate transactions, money, funds, all of that on behalf of the appointer. Quitclaim deeds, so we do see a lot of these in escrows. If they're interspousal deeds or transferring from mother-daughter, you know, anytime you're quitclaiming someone off the property, you're going to use a quitclaim deed. If you're recording deeds that are needing an R&T code, a revenue and tax code, you can email me, call me, or you can also reach out to your title affiliates if you ever need to draw any kind of deeds and need those R&T codes, those revenue and tax codes. Those codes are what you'll need to put on the document in order to be exempt from transfer tax. So if you have any deeds, any accommodation deeds you might be helping clients with, or they have questions, you just want to make sure they have those codes to use on the document in order to be exempt from, you know, transfer tax, reassessment tax, things like that. If it's a gift, if it's between spouses or in and out of a trust, things like that, you can quit claim title just to transfer, not, you know, specifically for a sale or anything like that. But if we do have buyers that are going to take title as a married man, married woman, you know, sole and separate property, then that spouse will always need to sign an interspousal deed releasing their interest to their spouse. California community property law is really strict, and anytime you're trying to take title as a sole and separate spouse, the other spouse does need to sign off quit claiming that interest. Even if they're not going on title, it still exists basically in California. Funding. So funding is the process when escrow requests the lender to fund the buyer's loan. You know, lender does not fund without us making that request. The lender also doesn't fund without making sure all the conditions are in, all the loan docs are signed, the buyer's funds have been receipted in, they're sourced all those funds to the account that they, you know, approved from the buyer. Once the lender funds the buyer's loan, the funds that they've sent, that they've wired, go to the title company. So the lender funds, the funds get wired to title, title will confirm receipt of those funds, and then we can release the file for recording. Recording, again, is filing those documents at the county recorder's office. You know, we release it with the title company, and the title company sends the docs down for recording. LA County doesn't allow you to fund and record in the same day. So anytime you're, you know, planning closings for LA County, you have to fund one day and close the next day. Orange County, Riverside, San Diego, all those counties, you can fund and record same day. The cutoff time to release a file for recording, either same day or next day, is 3:30. So as long as the file has funded, all the docs are in, money's in, everything's good to go, by 3:30, then you can release that file to record either special for Orange County, Riverside, San Diego, or if it's LA, it'll go the next day. Life of escrow, flow chart. So you have a buyer and seller, sign a purchase agreement, it's been fully executed, everyone's in agreement. The seller or the listing agent or the seller opens escrow. It just depends. I mean, most of the time the listing agent and the seller have the choice of escrow, so they open it. Every once in a while though, we get a buyer's agent that gets the choice of escrow. The buyer was able to choose. So we have selling agents that open escrow with us as well. You know, typically the turnaround time for the buyer to submit that EMD is 3 days after acceptance. Most of the time it is a wire. We do accept checks, personal cashier's checks. I've actually had someone one time offer to Venmo me his earnest money deposit, but we do not accept Venmo or credit cards. Unfortunately, no. It has to be submitted to our trust account. It's only acceptable by Federal Reserve wire transfers. We'll open title. Again, I know a lot of agents like to open title when they take a listing. You can absolutely do that. If you have the report when you're ready to open escrow, you can send us a copy of the report and we'll have title updated with all of our escrow information, the purchase price, the lender's loan amount, all that good stuff. Otherwise, we'll open it when we open escrow. Once we get the title report, we can prep all of our escrow documents, get everything out for signature, send everything out to a buyer, seller, listing agent, selling agent, all the packages go out, and the lender, of course, if there is a lender on the file. We typically like to make sure we have the buyer's EMD though before we send out our escrow documents to make sure that those funds are in escrow. Once the buyer and seller return all of our escrow documents, we'll do any additional documents that need to be done. Amendments, changes in terms, you know, the buyer's vesting we'll hopefully have by then, so we know exactly how they're going to hold title. The seller needs to pay an invoice, we'll draw an amendment for that. Any kind of change in terms after our escrow instructions and docs have been sent, we'll do that once they come back. We do review the prelim report to make sure Any encumbrances, any liens, any judgments, anything that stands out on that report, we make sure we look at, see what title needs to clear any exceptions, any taxes that need to be paid. That all gets reviewed by us. Once we get the seller's documents back, one thing that is in there that needs to get sent to title is that statement of identity or statement of information. The title company will abstract that document and just verify that the seller has no outstanding liens that are unsecured to the property. Judgments, liens, anything like that. It could be child support, spousal support. I've had probation judgments. I mean, it could be anything, but if it's recorded under the seller's name and social, it may not necessarily be recorded against the property. So that statement of information also clears that if there is any other liens. Hopefully nothing pops up. Every once in a while, you may get something. We order all the payoff demands, anything that's on title that needs to be paid off, mortgage, lien, judgments, as I mentioned. We'll order the demands based on the person who's holding the lien, the note, anything like that. We review all those demands, make sure we get all the fees inputted and our estimates, charges, things like that. We'll constantly be in touch with the lender to make sure that the lender has what they need, that anything they need from escrow is in, ordered, submitted. We'll work on all their prior to doc conditions. We order insurance for the buyer, give them their vesting amendment, things of that nature. We typically go back and forth with the lender on balancing until we're ready to make sure that everything balances on both sides. Their closing disclosure, my estimate, we are balanced, and they'll usually release docs and have the buyer sign. When it comes to the lender releasing documents, just keep in mind when that lender has issued that closing disclosure. Once that closing disclosure has been issued, there is a 3-day waiting period before they'll release loan documents. So it's always good to kind of keep on with the lender so we all know when that CD has been issued, then we kind of have a better idea when we can expect or anticipate getting loan documents and getting ready to fund and close. So we'll verify all the conditions, make sure if there's any termite reports, any staging invoices, any HOA docs, hopefully those have all been ordered. If you're having a listing that does have an HOA, I always recommend getting up front kind of the cost and turnaround time. A lot of these HOAs take 8 to 10 business days to get documents unless you order a rush. Right now, most of the HOAs I've been ordering docs from, it can be anywhere from $300 to $500. I just had an escrow that actually had 2 HOAs and came almost to $1,000 the seller had to pay upfront to order these documents. And we were on a short escrow, so we had to order them on a rush because of the turnaround time. It was 10 days, no less. So if you have an HOA, it's good to get in touch with that homeowners association, find out who the management company is, if they have any. We can help you with that too if you need to know, which HOA. I mean, we don't have a list or anything, but if you have their contact information, we can reach out and find out what the turnaround time is and the dollar amount from that management company. Loan documents. Once we get loan documents, we call the borrowers, the buyers to schedule an inspection to sign with a notary. They can sign with our office here, they can sign with a mobile notary, whatever's convenient for them. We request their final funds to close. We submit all their final documents with their loan docs to sign. At the same time, we submit all the seller's final documents for them to sign, any copies of their payoff demands, their estimates, any other amendments that need to be signed. The buyer will wire their funds to us at that time once they've signed their loan documents. We'll review everything. We send the docs back to the lender, make sure everything's been signed by all parties, all funds are in, and we request funding from the lender. Once it's been funded, we make sure to release that file for recording with the title company. If there are any funding conditions, so like let's say we send the docs back to the lender and there are conditions prior to funding. Let's say they need a correction on the insurance, or they need a correction on the estimate, or we're changing interest, depending on the day that we fund. We process all that with the lender, and once after that's all the funding conditions have been cleared, they'll really let us know and confirm that they've funded and the wire's been sent to title. So again, we'll release those docs for recording. Escrow confirms we're closed. Everyone's happy. Keys get to one new happy buyer. Seller is moving on. And once we close, it depends obviously to what time we record. As recording can happen anytime between 8 a.m. and I got notified on a closing at 6 p.m. yesterday. So it can happen anytime between 8 and 6. So once I get confirmation of closing, we notify all parties right away. the title company still has to wire funds to us. So I can't disperse until that title company is wired to us. So I always tell clients it's going to be at least 24 hours before you may see funds, depending on the time we close. If we record at 8 a.m., we'll gladly make sure we disperse the same day. But if we don't get confirmation until 5 or 6 in the evening, it will not be able to disperse till the following. We send out all the final closing statements, final closing docs to all parties, buyer, seller, agents, and we are completely done. Yay, that is escrow in a nutshell.
That is awesome. Anybody have any questions about what Sarah has just recently shared? Thank you, Sarah. Lots of great.
Okay.
Any questions out there?
My pleasure.
Sometimes we don't know what we don't know until we're in the midst of it. So I know from experience, Sarah's a wealth of information and very generous and kind-hearted that as you move forward and questions do start to come up, she's always happy to field those questions and provide you with answers.
I can go back to my information too. So if someone wants to email me or call me, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I know every escrow is different. New stuff comes up all the time. You know, even now, I still see new stuff every day that I'm like, oh, that's different. Like, what do we do here in this situation? So, yeah, if there's anything I can do to help you guys or anything to do to answer any questions, if something's confusing, even if I'm not on the escrow, I'm happy to just help.
Awesome. Perfect. Charles says, thanks for the class. Oh, and if there's another thank you, Aisha. Thank you. If there are no other and no questions at this time, we're going to thank you once again, and we'll do this again, I think, in 2 months. So if, you know, the more times we hear things, the better the information sinks in. So definitely join us again when we have this back on the calendar, probably in July. All right.
Thanks, Deborah. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.